Okay, team, this week we are very lucky. I've got a guy, very clever dude by the name of Blair Enns. I've been very privileged to be coached by Blair over the years. I've been a big follower of his. Blair runs a sales training company that specifically trains the creative industry and creative professionals. Blair is Canadian, which as New Zealanders, we love that already. And he lives in a village, not a town, called Caslow in British Columbia. And we've just worked out that his nearest airport is 321 kilometers away because he has to go over some mountain ranges. And I looked, Blair, at Wikipedia because I'd need to be really diligent as a student. And I went, wow, the population where you live was 1,049 people as of 2021 in Wikipedia. And that's an increase of 8.4% from 960. So you guys got into 4 digits now.
I don't believe it. It doesn't feel like we're 1,000 people.
And you're famous for your sourdough, or have I got that wrong?
Famous for my sourdough. I don't know where you got that.
Should we make that up? Should we make that up? This is like folklore.
Sure. Yeah, I did go through during COVID, like a lot of people, I went through a bread making phase. Even though I largely don't eat bread,
yes,
I went through a period of making a lot of bread.
Good. We also share a common interest in open water swimming, although I think the lakes that Blair swims in are probably a little bit colder than the ones in New Zealand here. So Blair is really, really good, guys. You're in for a real treat. Blair, welcome to the show. So lovely to have you here.
Thank you, St John. My pleasure to be here.
Okay, so give people a little bit of a rundown on, you and I are similar but different. We've come from an ad agency background, strategic planning, business development, ad agency world. Could you give people a quick sort of summary of who you are and what you do and where you are and how you got to where you are now?
Sure. I'm the founder of Win Without Pitching, which is a sales training organization. Started out as a solo consulting practice back in 2002. So we're approaching 23 years old. About half of that time, I was a consultant. And then for the second half, I've kind of scaled the business up a little bit to be a training organization. Our historical audience has always been what I call creative professionals. So those in the advertising and design professions, typically. The word pitch or pitching has a special meaning. It's not just a sales pitch. In the creative professions, a pitch is in the sale, to pitch the idea, to give the highest value product, the thinking, away for free in hopes that you'll be hired to implement the business. So I launched Win Without Pitching as a way to move my small family to this remote mountain village. Over the years, I've written 3 books. Over the years, our audience has naturally broadened out beyond creative professionals. And now we characterize the audience as anybody who's an expert advisor or practitioner first and a salesperson second. So the line is, we teach experts how to sell and price like the experts they are, rather than the transactional salespeople that they're not.
Yeah, love it. Listeners, if you notice how eloquent and how succinct Blair is already, I've learned a lot from this fella. So we are very, very lucky to have him on. Blair, let's get straight into it, because with our rural listeners, you and I have had chats before. They're feed reps, they're third reps. They could be where you are, or Alberta, or Saskatchewan, or Australia, New Zealand, UK, wherever, feed reps. They don't sell supposedly expertise. Sometimes they're selling what is perceived, and they're pretty tough by some price taking, therefore price buying farmers. So what's your thoughts on the whole concept of commodities, and what would be in your wisdom a way to sometimes combat some of that sort of perception?
So last week I did a talk to 750 plumbers and HVAC technicians. When I was invited, every once in a while I get invited to speak to an audience that's really, if you think of, I call them experts. Let's call them professionals, largely like a broad term of professionals. So what is it about? My first reaction is, okay, plumbers and HVAC techs. They could see themselves as experts, or they could see themselves as sellers of commodified services. And really, if you talk to them individually, some will be in one camp and some will be in the other. At the end of the day, they're all in the same business, but their perception of their business, what they're selling, and even how they add or don't add value in the sale differs from person to person. So I really think at the end of the day, you are a seller of expertise if you believe you are. and you're a seller of a commodity if you believe you are. Now, a friend of mine wrote a great book called The Growth Leader. And he says that your sales call should be so good that your clients would be willing to pay for it. And I think that is a wonderful ideal to strive to. So it kind of begs the question, how are you adding value in the sale? And we can tie that pretty directly to, are you showing up as a vendor or are you showing up as the expert?
I love that. I love that. I always say to my students, my rural students, that if you sell the same, you're treated the same. And if you sell like a commodity, you're treated like a commodity. So there's a lot of mindset in there, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
And positioning. Could we unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's like we're a lot of it does come down to mindset. And in my latest book, one of the principles I talk about is the expert's mindset. And it begs the question. So like you, I run a sales training organization, and we, like you, I'm sure we teach people some frameworks. Like, here's how you handle these certain situations. And some people, when they experience the frameworks, when they hear them for the first time, they naturally gravitate to them. It feels natural to them. And to some, they try them on and they think, I can't imagine myself doing that or saying that. And that's because they have more of a vendor mindset than an expert mindset. There are people who just go, yeah, I can do that. I can say that. That makes perfect sense to me. So you have these frameworks that we layer over top of kind of a pattern of general behavior. And I'll generalize and say the behavior is either that of the expert or it's that of a vendor. The frameworks will not sit well with you if the general pattern of behavior that you've been kind of demonstrating and how you've been showing up is that of the vendor. So how do you change? How do you stop yourself from acting like the vendor and begin to act like the expert and just show up like the expert in the sale? And it starts with that word that you used, which is mindset. It starts with the thoughts that are in your own head. So we have an expert's mantra that we have people repeat to themselves before a sale so that they can get themselves into that expert's mindset.
Very good. So I have some companies that do like irrigation, set up irrigation systems for dairy farms, or agronomists, certified crop advisors, you call them up in your world. And what they do is they do the plans, they give the plans, and then the farmer goes and shops and uses the cheaper installer. Or they do the agronomic program or the irrigation plan, and they say, oh, thanks very much, and off we go. What would be your advice to stop that?
Well, without knowing anything about the business, about the agricultural business, even though I grew up in a prairie province, I worked in ad agencies on accounts like CN Rail, which is all agriculture. My wife comes from good farming stock, so I should know more about this, but the business than I do. Even though I don't know much about the business, my first reaction, what I'm hearing you say is, in the sale, the salesperson is doing a whole bunch of valuable work for free and giving it away for free.
Correct.
So you could charge for that. You could do a formal diagnostic. You could charge for that. If the customer buys from you, you could waive that or roll that fee up into the purchase, where effectively it gets waived. That's just one way to think about it. That's my first reaction. What's your reaction to that? Is this a business where you can charge for that, or everybody's giving it away for free and you can't monetize it?
The reason I ask it, it's a real scenario, and I would have exactly the same answer. I'd say, well, if you do go this, you get it waived. But what you do is you separate, the strategy, the thinking from the doing. And, obviously then we talk about maybe the translation of those two things dropping between the stools, because obviously the thinking and the design is heavily correlated to the successful installation. And I might talk about my favorite friend, loss aversion, in terms of if a few things go skew with and we don't quite translate, that there might be some risk that maybe the farmer hasn't recognized. And I'd have that conversation with them. But you talked about this wonderful quote from former CEO of Netscape, Jim. There are only two ways to make money in business: bundling and unbundling. Talk to us about bundling and unbundling as you see it, because I think that is a really beautiful tool potentially for helping them differentiate.
Yeah, so you're a customer, you're selling multiple things to your customer. Customer's going to want to see a line item for everything. And I don't mean just the products you're selling. You could also think of the services that you might be able to add on top of that, some advisory just being available to them, et cetera. Maybe you see that as standard, everybody gets it, but maybe it doesn't have to be standard. Maybe there's some sort of advisory bundle that you can add to that. But I always love the mobile phone industry because is there a more commodified business than your mobile plan? So you would think, because it's so highly commodified, that these would not be profitable businesses, but they are highly profitable businesses. And the reason they are highly profitable businesses is they all live by the same motto when it comes to your bill, your monthly bill. And that is make it easy to understand and impossible to compare. So how do they do that? They constantly change the bundles. So in Canada, many years ago, when I first became aware of this, they would change the bundles once a month. And then they moved up to once a week. And then they started changing the bundles every day. Now they change the bundles multiple times a day. So if you get your plan from your current provider and you go to shop it against a competitor, you will never find an apples to apples comparison where with the same amount of data, the same amount of talk minutes, the same amount of text, the same amount of long distance, whatever they're bundling into the plan. Yeah. The components of those bundles are always changing, and they're making sure that their bundle never directly matches their competitors' bundles. And that's how they maintain such high margin. As soon as you go full a la carte, it allows the client to pick apart. It's the same thing in cable bundles.
Totally. Same with
right?
energy.
There's one channel you really want, and you're getting the other 30 because they're bundled together.
Yeah, 100%. I've seen that. Like, we just chucked some solar in, and I was trying to get fiber, internet with gas, with electricity, and oh my goodness, it was a cluster. Like I couldn't even begin to compare. So perfect.
One more quick one. If you're a pub owner and you want to sell Guinness, now owned by Diageo, you have to carry all these other Diageo brands. In fact, you might even have to be exclusively Diageo to carry Guinness. So just another example of bundling.
Yeah. So I think your challenge to the listeners is there, work out what is something that you can do that has superior value or high perceived expertise, and that becomes in the bundle. It's like when my guys say, yeah, but we can't get them to buy this type of seed, but we've only got a certain amount of this seed. I said, well, in order to get that seed, you're going to take some of that seed, and that's worked a treat for them.
Yeah, a portfolio.
Yes, exactly right, Blair. Now, pricing guidance. Tell us about your views on offering pricing guidance, because a lot of my guys are scaredy cats, like, oh, I can't say the price. Or the farmer says, how much is it, for a ton of urea, or, how much is it for glyphosate, God forbid, or whatever they're asking for. And they're like a pricing desk, like a machine pricing desk. And I teach them not to do that, but this is your gig, not mine. What's your philosophy on offering pricing guidance early? Could you unpack that for people? I'm very aware of your model, but I think for those that don't know you, could you take them through that?
I used to think, and I probably even taught it for a few years, that when in price negotiating, he who speaks first loses. And now the science is pretty clear that the opposite is true. So you shouldn't be frustrated by a client's request to talk about price if they say how much for X. What you want to do is you want to embrace this principle known as anchoring, the anchoring effect, or anchoring and adjusting. And you want to offer a range depending on variables, and you want to start on the high end of the range. In fact, you want the high end of the range to be so high that you're looking for a visible reaction from the customer. So on the high end, it might be X, and it might be X per acre. I don't know how your business works, but whatever X is. So you would think of your most elaborate, most needy customer who pays you the most money, right? And you translate it and say, well, we have some customers who pay us X per acre, or whatever the metric is, whatever the unit is. Pause, 2, 3, 4, let the big number sink in. And on the low end, it might be as much as Y. So ideally, you have as big a range as you can possibly conceive of. And now you've spoken first, you've anchored at the high end, and that first price, that anchor, it's the metaphor I use is it's like the moon hanging in the sky, pulling toward it the tide that is the average price, the average settled price. And if you don't anchor high, your customer is going to anchor low. So you anchor with a really big number. You let your client react to it. You might, to set the low end of the range, you might say, well, what were you hoping to spend? They might give you a price, and you can say, well, yeah, we might be able to do something in that range. Now you have a range. Now, if the client has reacted to the top end of the range and they say, there's no way I'm paying that, or there's no way I would ever pay that, or that's way too expensive, you can let them lower that range. Well, what would you pay? What in the best case scenario, what kind of investment do you think it makes sense to make? So let them lower the range, and depending on how, the variance you have in the range, you might be able to they might be able to cut that in half, and you still have a good number to work with. So that's a much more effective approach, especially over multiple deals, multiple sales calls. You will have a better average settled price if you speak first, you offer a range, and you start with the high end of the range, let the client set the low end of the range, and let them adjust the high end.
I would, in more derogatory terms, call it a decoy. And I would say, and now I'm going to be rural in my language, Blair, I would want to be almost shitting myself when I'm putting that big price number in the premium versus the standard and the basic. But I think if people want to understand that more, I think they need to reach out to you and grab hold of those. But so when it comes to selling, we just touched upon around how you turn up and how you show up and your conviction and your confidence. Can you talk to people around the art of the conversation? Because your latest book, The 4 Conversations, which I recommend everyone goes and buys a copy of, there's an arc of those conversations. Can you run through that quickly? And then maybe we could emphasize the value conversation, because where my beloved guys and girls, my people, get beaten up really hard is by price taking farmers who ultimately and naturally become very price buying. So could you take them through the conversations and that arc?
Yeah, so this is a model, a view of the world. And as I say early in the book, all models are wrong. Some are useful. Those aren't my words. That's a quote for somebody who's famous for essentially just that quote. So, and the model is this idea that we view the sale of expertise as a series of 4 linear and discrete conversations. They're orderly, they follow each other, they're all neatly contained. But the reality is that's not always what's happened. That's not always what happens. The conversations, however, are the probative conversation, where the objective is to prove your expertise to the client and the customer and move in their mind from this powerless position of just another vendor to the position of the expert. Now, the probative conversation is the conversation that happens without you present. It's really about your reputation preceding you. So let's set that one aside. The second conversation and the first person-to-person conversation is a qualifying conversation. This is where you're vetting the lead to determine if an opportunity exists. A qualifying conversation to the listeners is going to be pretty quick. You're going to know pretty quickly. You can judge based on the size of the farm, some other basic criteria, whether or not this is a pretty good fit. There might be a decision maker element there that you've got to spend some time on, but even things around time frame and intent that you would uncover in a qualifying conversation, you can move that through that pretty quickly. The third conversation is the value conversation. It's also my favorite too, St. John. The value conversation, you're endeavoring to determine how much value that you can help to create, and then the share of that value that you might command in terms of your price. So you'd be doing some calculations with the customer about the acreage, the yield, the return on investment of whatever it is you're selling, whether it's seed or herbicide, whatever it is. And then you're setting pricing guidance based on that number. And you're using a technique similar to what we just modeled, which is throw out a range, start with a high number. If the client insists on lowering the high number, let them lower it, ask them if they had the budget at the low end of what they would like to be able to see if you can do for that number. And now you've got a range. And then the fourth conversation is the closing conversation, where you put forward options. Now, in some more traditional businesses of expertise, like design firms, ad agencies, consulting firms, there's often a gap between the value conversation and the closing conversation, where you go away and write the proposal. And maybe there is for the listener, maybe there isn't. Maybe you can close right in this conversation. So the objective of the closing conversation is to transition seamlessly from the sale to the engagement. It's help the client choose a path forward, basically. Implied in that is the idea that your solutions, your proposal, should contain options. More than one way to do this. You're putting forward more than one ways that you might help your customer at more than one price point. And we can get into the science of it, but the best number of options to put forward is 3. 4 is also fine. 2 is good, but if you use 3, your average deal value will go up.
Correct. You, Blair, just to make you shudder with the millions of dollars that are lost, millions, I'd say tens, maybe even hundreds. You will not believe how many rural clients, when I do proposal breakdowns with them, they only present one price. And
it is the lowest hanging fruit on the sales tree, is to go from 1 option proposals to 3. Your closing ratio goes up, your average proposal value goes up.
Yeah, guys, listen to what he's saying. This is a sales call you almost want to be paying for, as we talked about earlier in the call. This is very, very good advice. If you want to suffer and struggle, just ignore everything that Blair is telling you. Now, most sales reps do actually create their own suffering and struggling, as you well know. I always say that basic closing problems are actually opening problems, but that maybe that's a story for another day.
I agree with you.
Yeah, thank you. Talk to me about premature proposals and how you avoid people, because sometimes farmers, they're rough and tough, and they're very important to us, but they're hard. They're hard taskmasters. They're hard to deal with. They just go, send me a quote, send me a proposal.
I love that line, the request for an early proposal. And my response is, I don't believe in scripts, but I do have set pieces,
please,
set sentences that just, hear the objection.
I'm so looking forward to hearing these, because the listeners are getting real juice here.
I'd be happy to send you a proposal if it makes sense to do so. Let me ask you a few more questions.
Yeah.
All right. So you get it. It's like, this is too early. This is a brush off. Yeah. Be happy to do that if it makes it. We think as salespeople, when we're asked for a proposal, it's our job and we have to comply. Or we think that if we do, our job is to write proposals, and the more proposals we write, the more deals will close. Those two things don't correlate super closely, and they do create a lot of work for you. And it's not, if you've done this long enough, when the farmer, the customer says, yeah, send me a proposal, when it's a brush off.
Spidey sense. I always say to my students, quotes don't qualify.
That's a good one. Yeah.
I say, yes, I do have scripts, as long as they don't sound scripted, right? Because it's all about the intent from where you come from when you deliver it. But, whether you're learning your lines and letting them land or whatever else, I think it's really important that we don't send you a shoddy or shabby proposal that's waste your time and mine. And I think even you taught me that, or someone clever like you taught me that. But, they're such eager beavers, and they haven't got enough leads. And then if the listeners are picking up what you're putting down, the probative conversation, or I would call it maybe the positioning conversation, like first arc, for me in layman's terms is show them how good you are before you even meet them. And so this is why Blair has an outstanding podcast, guys. You need to listen to, called Two Bobs. And the banter between you and your motley friend, David C. Bicker, is very entertaining, I might add. You make me laugh, which is good. So Two Bobs, we'll put it in the thing. But Blair, he's written 3 best-selling books. And what he's taught me, along with lots of wonderful coaches that I've been privileged to work with and learn from, is the importance of pre-sale positioning. And so I think what happens is, and because we're marketing ad agency guys as well, Blair, this integration between marketing and sales should be seamless. And I like them centralized, not decentralized, because, the pre-sale positioning does all the heavy lifting for you and the pre-qualification for you. And I'm not talking about funnels and nurturing and forms and all that kind of stuff. What's your thoughts on that around? Because I think rural companies really neglect and miss a massive opportunity where they don't sync sales and marketing to, because marketing, you know the old adage, the sales guys go, oh, you're the guys that spend all the money and we're the guys that make the money. And it's like Tom and Jerry, cat and mouse. And it's
Yeah.
actually quite tiresome.
We generate you the leads and you don't close the leads.
And on it goes. And I mean, honestly, I can just predict it, and I talk about it in our weekly emails. But that pre-sale positioning, what would you say to that? Tell the listeners about how important it is that you get your marketing set up to help your sales team.
Yeah. And the challenge with salespeople is like, it's this conversation, what I call the probative conversation, where you prove your expertise and you move in the mind of the customer from a vendor to the expert. It's hard to do. That is a function of your reputation preceding you. So that can be done through word of mouth, through your very best customers saying good things about you and your products. It can be done through the marketing you do online. And I don't know the agro business enough to know what the best avenues for building reputation are.
Other farmers, that's what it is.
At the farmer level.
Yeah, farmers believe other farmers. They listen to their neighbors. They don't watch the data visualization, the eye candy, the trials, and everything else. It's like, what's Bill doing?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a tough one, because how do you do that? You have to build that reputation over time. Yeah. Not just your product, but you and how you stand behind the product. And when there's trouble, they reach out to you and you step in. That's an interesting thing we don't talk about enough, is like how brands, and not so much brands, but how loyalty is built.
Yeah.
I think it was in my first book. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was the first book that I don't talk about. So I've really written 4. And I may have written about this in Pricing Creativity. In one of the books I wrote, I told the story of the Marriott Corporation in the 80s. They did a study to determine which of their customers were the most loyal. And their theory going into the study was it would clearly show that customers that had a flawless stay would be the most loyal. And that's not what their research found. What they found was the most loyal customers were the customers who had a problem with their stay, who brought that problem to the attention of somebody in the property and had it promptly resolved to their satisfaction. So loyalty comes from solving problems after the sale. You can only solve problems after the sale. You will empower yourself to do so if you have enough margin in the deal. Now, I often say to my ad agency clients, I could sit in your office and I could watch you answer your phone, and I could tell from your facial reaction, as soon as you looked down and saw the number on the ringing phone, I could tell who your most profitable and loyal clients are and who your least profitable and least loyal clients are. And these two things go hand in hand. So profit drives loyalty. So gross margin drives loyalty. It's not the other way around. It's not that your most loyal clients are your most profitable. Your most profitable ones are your most loyal, because you take some of that profit and you help them when they need help.
Correct.
You're there to help them navigate through the problem. And if you don't have enough margin in the deal and the customer has a problem and they reach out to you, you think, I don't have time for that. You ground me down to that stupid price and you fix it yourself.
Yeah. Seller's remorse.
Seller's remorse. So margin drives loyalty.
Yeah, understand. Like with my machinery guys, when they sell headers or tractors or whatever else, it's not actually the sale. I mean, we run a lot of farming groups and farming panels and customer experience and buyer journey, or have done in the past. And I say, what's the most important part of that sales process? What do you think the answer is?
After sales service?
Bang on. First follow-up. How's that machine going? Is it doing everything it's supposed to be doing? I just want to check. And it's that almost pastoral care, that duty of care. And it's that Maya Angelou quote, they don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And that
it's a great one.
Is huge in farming. And the thing that people don't understand with selling to farmers is the risk of them making a bad decision is so high, because they have to wake up every day, man or woman, and see that thing or see that crop or see that animal. It's not like a CMO or a CTO where they scoot in and out every 18 months, 2 months. They live with that decision. So the risk profile is so much higher, and people don't understand that. But yeah,
Highest risk entrepreneurs, among the highest risk entrepreneurs out there, very, very personal. It reminds me a lot of financial planning. So we do some work with financial advisors.
mm,
They get a customer, they're with them for life and they take care of them. That is a long-term relationship. I imagine it's the same thing in your business. And when
yeah,
you disappoint that person, you're done. Like they
yeah.
have moved on.
If
It's
you
on you.
foreclose on the bank and you don't give them the funding as a dairy farmer, they will ban you for not just families, generations, and you won't get a look in. Like they are savage on you. Why do you think most salespeople struggle and suffer?
So my most recent book is about conversations, about viewing the sale as a series of conversations. And I'm fond of saying, you're all very, like to a training group, I'm leading a workshop next week. I'll say this line, you're all very good conversationalists. You would not be here. You would not be successful in business. You would not be in this workshop if that were not true. But there's something about a sales conversation where the dynamics are different and we tend to lose or fumble our most basic abilities to communicate. What happens is we get these ideas of what it means to sell. We think it's our job to talk somebody into something, and we transmit more than we receive. We're beaming information at them. The client can sense this. Trust drops, and we destroy the natural to and fro, give and take, open, honest, two-way communication that is characteristic of a conversation. So even though we think we're conversing, it's really brief and present. We're pitching our stuff to the client.
Yeah.
They're withholding some honest information sometimes.
Yeah.
If they think we're trying to convince them of something, they quit giving us honest information back. As soon as you go, and I'm fond of saying you can present to people or you can be present to them. You cannot do both. So you have to decide. As soon as you go into presentation mode, I imagine that there's this invisible wall that goes up between you and the customer.
100%.
And that is the wall that keeps honest information from coming back to you.
What a great metaphor. I think when you're more interested in serving your needs rather than your client, this is where you come unstuck. I think assumption is a real killer of sales as well. We've also we touched on it before in some of our training around the discipline of detachment. And then can you, Blair, talk to me about the formula of your wanting of the client less than their desire of you? Can you remember the formula?
P equals DB over D.
That's right. Can you spell that out for people?
That's the first principle of selling expertise. P equals DB over D. So P is power. Your power in the sale is a function of your desirability, DB, how badly the customer wants your product or an engagement with you, over your desire, D, how badly you want to do business with this customer. Otherwise stated, whoever wants it the most has the least power. So I consider that the first principle of selling expertise. And again, coming out of the ad agency business, the way I was never taught to sell really, but it was modeled for me. What was modeled was give all your power away in the sale by leaning on passion and enthusiasm and saying, I'm really passionate about your brand. I really want this business.
Oh, my favorite word, which makes me very nauseous. We're so excited.
Yeah.
And I always say, someone told me, I can't remember who it was, but they said enthusiasm doesn't equal effectiveness.
Imagine you go in to see and he says, oh, I'm really passionate about your health. I'm so excited to take care of you. I've got the surgery coming up. I'm so excited.
Yeah,
I'm
trying to run for the door right now.
It's a human condition. We are repulsed by neediness. It's sad, but it's true. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
So many of my rural reps create their own suffering and struggling by not prospecting and canvassing, not doing the pre-positioning, probably to their fairness and their credit, not getting the true support from their marketing because the marketing is not connecting with the conversations those clients are having in their own head. I mean, as Oren Clough, he talks about the power of the frame. This is what Blair's talking about. Blair, can you talk about the power of the frame in your own words, what that means so people understand it?
Yeah, so Claffs, he didn't invent this term, but he's certainly popularized it. It's the idea of frame control. So a frame is a viewpoint on a social interaction. And when I read this in Claff's book, Pitch Anything, which sounds like the opposite of my book, Win Without Pitching, I was really struck by this framework, this model. I find it fascinating. So what Claff says is two different people come to a social interaction. So let's think of a sale. There's a buyer and a seller. Each person has a frame, a view of the interaction. Now, I will generalize and say, as a salesperson, let's say there are only two frames. One is, I am the expert, I am the prize. And the other is, the customer has the money, they are the prize. And what Claff says is, and I'm sure the science supports this, is frames do not play nice. At the end of the interaction, one frame will destroy the other, and both parties will have a shared frame. They will both view, so back to my generalization, they will both view one of them as the prize to be won in the relationship. And if you go into that attitude with, well, they're the customer, they have the money, I've got to win this business, the client knows it, that's communicated to the client. Everybody understands that they are the prize to be won. And if you win, you will be lucky. Now, somebody who's a really well-positioned expert who has a deep sense of confidence about their ability to help and their ability to create value is going to go in with an opposite mindset. Their mindset, their frame is going to be, I am the expert, I'm the prize. And that's the first line of our 4-line mantra that gets you into that expert mindset. I am the expert, I am the prize. I'm on a mission to help. I can only do that if you let me lead. I accept that all will not follow. Back to your point about detachment. So I'm the expert. I'm going to create value. If we do business together, the client will be lucky. I'll be lucky too, but I want to acknowledge that I have something of value. And if we do business together, this customer will be better off.
Yeah.
So gets you into that mindset, and you go in with that frame that you are the prize to be won. Now, I'm generalizing. You're either the expert or the prize or the client is. It's probably truer that these are endpoints on a spectrum, and you're trying to move the frame towards your end of the spectrum.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really funny when I talk to my clients, I would rather them have better customers than lots of customers. Because that neediness, when I hear the words, I just need to get in front of more customers, those set off red warning church bells for me. Sirens of you're just burning leads. What I wanted to say is if your conversation doesn't flow and it doesn't feel normal or natural, you're doing it wrong. And this is where Blair's teaching you guys, and he's taught me this, is that there's a real art to the conversation, and I strongly recommend you get his book. The other thing, Blair, I want to talk about is that how do you handle objections? Do you like to prevent them like me? And sorry, just before I get there, just one thing that you sparked on me is I always say to my students, you've got to sell slow to sell fast, and detach yourself from the outcome and attach yourself to the process. So guys, please make sure you're listening to what Blair is saying here about this conversational arc and the qualification and the value. And the fact that if you actually do those things right, you take all the pressure off the closing, because something very magical happens, not all the time, is the customer magically closes themselves. Blair, do you know what I hate in my world? I'm going to name them, shame them. Jeremy Minor, Grant Cardone, those kind of guys. And there's always be closing bullshit. And I just said, I think you've got it completely wrong because you don't even understand basic human psychology and reactions theory, that people don't like being things done to them. People don't like being told, they like being asked. And what you've taught me is the power of questions and conversation, and then eliciting and enrolling and not repelling, but attracting and inviting the customer in. The power of questions is so important, aren't they?
Yeah, it's so much to unpack there, and we're tying a lot together.
We are. But questions,
conversations. The frameworks that we teach are frameworks of the questions that you ask. They're not so much frameworks about things that you say. Again, there's certain set pieces, but some people do well with scripts. Some people don't. They will sound scripted. And I think, I'm sure you do, you agree with this, St John, but if you've got a script, it's for your own training. It's for your own learning so that the language becomes yours. And then you can use it.
It's a guardrail.
Yeah. Now, speaking to the gentleman that you mentioned, I don't know I don't know about other worlds, like other domains in sales. I do know that in a sale of expertise, you cannot, and this is going to be particularly true when you're selling to when you're selling to a farmer, you can't, your sales techniques cannot leave a wake of carnage, because if you have a massive TAM, total addressable market,
Yeah.
and the relationship is not important to what it is that you're selling, then you can use the hard close techniques all day long.
Exactly.
But, that's why I wrote this book, The 4 Conversations. The subtitle is A New Model for Selling Expertise. And I think it's, like I say, if you go into a coffee shop and the barista is rude to you or the clerk is rude to you, you don't extrapolate from that to the quality of the coffee. And it might not even be the case if you're selling the quality of the seed. But if you see yourself as the expert, if you're selling a relationship with yourself where in addition to the product, you are going to be there for your customer, you're going to be available to answer questions, to help them to make future decisions, then the way you sell has to be representative of the way you're going to show up once they are a customer. So for that reason, the sale is the sample, and we can't always be closing. To your point, you referenced this earlier. So I have, in the model, it's 4 conversations. We have a 12-hour workshop, 3 hours a day on Zoom, roughly 1 conversation per day. Everybody thinks that we're going to spend the most time on the closing conversation. We spend the least time on the closing conversation.
100%.
To your points engine, you handled the previous conversations well, and you said go slow to go fast. They close themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
But the common mistake is skip over all the important stuff.
Yeah.
And write that proposal because somebody said, send me a proposal.
Yeah.
And then you keep following up on somebody who's never going to buy.
100%. And sunk cost fallacy and everything else. I always sort of say that the closing should be the least thing you do. It's the opening and how you treat them and everything else. Last 2 questions. Often in the commodity market in rural, I always ask my students, what's the most important part of the sales process? Go on, Blair. I'm going to ask you the question. What do you think is the most important part of the sales process?
Oh, I don't know. What's the most important of the sales process? I think it's probably the thoughts that are in your head and just the way you show up. And I know that's a generalized answer.
No, it's very close. It's you, the salesperson.
Yeah.
I always say, because in rural market, to your point, relationships and a limited TAM, a limited market, they are buying into you before they buy into everything else and how you make them feel. And we talk about non-assumptive selling and buyer safety. But Blair, I want to make this really interesting for you. Who has been the biggest influence on you? Who is someone that has really influenced you in how you've got to where you are?
There's a woman named Pauline O'Malley in Vancouver, British Columbia. She taught me, the only sales training course I ever took was from her. And then I licensed some material from her for the first few years of my business. She got me to put some formal structure around selling. And she also introduced me to the idea, that pretty profound idea, that buying is changing and selling therefore is change management.
Yeah. All decisions are about change. Best sales books you've ever read?
I own all the sales books. I've read very few of them cover to cover. I don't like reading about sales.
What do you like reading about?
I like bringing the outside in. So I've written about selling. I've written about pricing. For me to understand pricing, I had to read the canon of literature. There's just something about the topic, that there is a body of literature, of science, and it's helpful to know it. I write about selling from the point of view of somebody who knows what bad selling looks like, because I've been on the buying end of a lot of bad selling. So for some reason, the way a lot of sales books are written don't sit well with me. But the one that I thought was amazing, even though it was kind of a cobbled together book, was Mahan Khalsa's Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play. Now, that book was really a series of recordings that somebody transcribed, and you'll find different versions of it in different places if you can find it. But that book is the most philosophically aligned with my books.
Yeah. Well said. And we're definitely going to point the listeners to your books. Your podcast, what are the podcasts you really listen to? I know you're a big learning machine.
So I think the best podcast out there right now for business owners is called Founders by David Senra. This is a fairly young guy. He's under 40, I think, might be younger than that, who reads a biography of a founder, somebody who's founded a successful business once a week and then does a podcast on it. And he's just blown up. And if I could only listen to one podcast, it would be that. I also listen to a bunch of podcasts from economists, not because I'm particularly interested in economics, but some of them are Econ Talk. Russ Roberts is a very good interviewer, broad subject matter, and Conversations with Tyler Cowen. He's a polymath. He's a genius on many topics and fascinating to listen to. There are many others as well, but those jump to mind.
Of course. Last few questions. What were some beliefs or convictions you held very tightly or believed in when it came to sales that you no longer believe in, that you've changed your mind and your position on?
It's everybody's job to sell.
Tell me more.
Well, flip it around. Just ask yourself the question, as I did, what if it wasn't everybody's job to sell? What would that mean? That would mean all these people out there for whom selling is their second job. Now, your audience, these are salespeople. It's their first job. Yeah. But there's a whole universe of people out there who decided they wanted to be something, an engineer, an architect, a designer, etc. Then at some point they realized, or they were told, you want to do this job that you're trained for? Well, there's a second job. You kind of have to do it first. You have to sell it. So I built a business around helping those people, but just as often, I'll go into an organization and say, why are you trying to make all of these implementers, all these technical people, salespeople? There are some, if you freed them from what is a burden to them, what is not natural to them, what they don't want to do, and you allowed them to do the thing that they loved, what would happen? They would be more productive. You would put more better suited people into the sales role. I think there's an epidemic of people blindly repeating that line. It's everybody's job to sell. And if you just asked, what if it wasn't, the truth would be revealed, which is it shouldn't be everybody's job to sell.
Well said. If you had one piece of advice to give raw salespeople, and I know it's not your sector, but there's a lot of value in what we've discussed, you could only give them one piece of advice, what would it be and why?
I think the piece of advice is it doesn't really matter what you're selling. You should view yourself not just a seller of that product or that service, but you should view yourself as an advisor. And you might be able to charge for the advisory services that you deliver, or it might just be part of the package. I think there's this convergence in other worlds where consulting is merging with engineering, which is merging with design, which is merging with software engineering and AI, et cetera, to the point where many people have said it's all professional services now. I think you should think about your job as professional services. You are an advisor to these people. And as part of the implementation of your advice is the products that they can buy from you to help implement your guidance.
Yeah, I love them. A lot of my guys want to be a trusted advisor, but they're too fast. It's like we have a rule here. You don't give yourself your own nicknames. That title is bestowed on you and it's earned, not entitled. The concept I have is you need to be a buyer's assistant.
Yeah.
And a buyer's assistant, you don't do anything that sells. You do everything to help your buyer make a good, accurate and informed decision, whether it ends up being you or someone else. And I think that's when your buyers feel really safe. Blair, you've been an absolute legend. Thank you for coming on the show. I know you work with some very famous people. The people that we won't rattle off that you interview on your podcast is gobsmacking. Can I just say you've had a huge impact on me and my professional career. I hold you in very high respect. I love your podcast with David C. Baker. I would love to get David on the show. I love the way you guys think. I love the fact that you are helping salespeople, and I know you're more in the expertise space, but there's so much value in what you've said, is that you're helping people stop being powerless. And then that whole Martin Seligman concept of learned helplessness, what you're doing, what you're putting out your resources in materials, you're helping people going from powerless to having power. And when we say power, we mean that sentence case, not all caps. So you do wonderful work, my friend, and please keep it up. And thank you for making time for us.
Thank you, St John. Those are kind words. And I have to say, I feel very ideologically aligned with you and the advice that you give to your clients. So it's really my honor to be here and have this conversation with you.
Cool. Blair, last thing, we'll point people to your books, Price and Creativity, The Win Without Pitching Manifesto. That's a beautiful book, beautifully produced, I might add as well. And then your latest book, 4 Conversations. I'm looking forward to your next book in 8 years' time. Last thing, where is best for people to connect you? Because there's been a lot of people that want to find out more about what you do.
They can go to winwithoutpitching.com, or I am Blair Enns on LinkedIn.
Beautiful. Blair, my man, you travel safe, sir. Enjoy your trip to Aussie. Hopefully we will catch up in person soon.